I never thought my life would change so much in a single day, but that's exactly what happened on that fateful Tuesday in April. It started off as just another rough day at the office. I work as a financial advisor at a big firm in the city, and that morning my biggest client called to tell me he was pulling all his investments. Then I spilled coffee all over my white shirt right before a big presentation. To top it all off, my boss gave me a hard time in front of the entire department for a minor error in a report. By the time when 5 o'clock rolled around, I was ready to go home, crack open a beer, and forget the day had ever happened. If only I'd known what was waiting for me there. I pulled into the driveway of our suburban MC Munion, the one my wife Olivia had insisted we buy even though it was way more space than we needed. As I was about to walk in the front door, I heard voices coming from the partially open window of I'm sitting in the living room. Sophia, it was incredible. Olivia was saying she recognized the excited term she used when gossiping with her sister. We did it 3 times today, once in the morning after Jack left for work, then again at lunch, and just an hour ago. God, I've forgotten how good Dur is in bed. I froze my hand on the doorknob. Derek was the name of Olivia's college boyfriend, the one who'd broken Sophia. What on earth was she talking about? Olivia, don't worry, Jack won't find out. Sophia, but he might. Olivia, he's too busy at work to notice anything else. Sophia, I've decided to stop pretending I'm filing for divorce. Olivia, divorce after only 3 years of marriage? Sophia asked, her voice hesitant. Is that really wise? Olivia replied smugly, Oh, don't worry, I've got it all figured out. California is a community property state, she continued. That means I'm entitled to half of everything, including all those assets he inherited when his father died last year. Once the divorce is final, she added, I'll be set for life. And Derek, I can finally be together without having to hide the fact that we're together. I stumbled backwards reading from what I just heard. The woman I pledged to love and cherish till death us part had been cheating on me, and now she was planning to leave me and take half of everything I owned in the process. I somehow managed to get back in my car without making a sound. I peeled out of the driveway and just started. I drove aimlessly, my mind racing. How long had this been going on? How could I have been so blind? The signs were there, if I was honest with myself. The way Olivia always seemed distracted and uninterested when we were together. Her constant excuses for why she didn't want to be intimate. The hush-firm conversations that ended abruptly when I walked in the room. I thought back to the early days of our relationship. We met at a charity gala shortly after I started at the firm. Olivia was stunningly beautiful, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in me. Things moved quickly after that. Within 6 months, we were engaged, and we tied the knot in a lavish ceremony less than a year after our first date. At the time, I was so caught up in the whirlwind romance that I ignored the voice in the back of my head telling me it was all happening too fast. I suddenly realized that Olivia had been playing me from the start. She'd seen a naive rich boy and decided to sink her claws in as the initial shock wore off. I felt cold anger start to set in. Was I going to let her get away with this? I may have been a fool, but I wasn't about to let her ruin me financially too. I pulled into the parking lot of a 24-hour diner and tried to calm down. I went to the diner and tried to calm my racing thoughts enough to come up with a plan. I needed to act fast before Olivia could file those divorce papers. First things first, I needed a lawyer, and a good one. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the number for Ethan Goldstein. He was the best divorce attorney in the state and had helped my college roommate through. Ethan, it's Jack Thorne. I need your help, and I need it fast. How soon can you meet? I was sitting across from Ethan in a private booth at the back of the diner telling him the whole story. He listened without judging me, only interrupting to ask for more details. When I finished, Ethan leaned back and steepled his fingers. Jack, here's what we're going to do. First, we need to secure your assets before your wife can touch them. I'm going to put you in touch with the forensic accountant I know. He'll help us track down and document every penny that's rightfully yours. He pulled out a legal pad and started scribbling. Notes, next, we need to file for divorce ourselves before she has a chance to do it. That way, we control the narrative from the start. We're going to cite fidelity as grands, which will work in our favor when it comes to the division of assets. I nodded, feeling a glimmer of hope for the first time since overhearing Olivia's conversation. What about the house and our other joint property? Leave that to me, Ethan said confidently. I've got a few tricks up my sleeve that should help us come out on top. Do you have somewhere you can stay for the next few days? It's best if you're not in the house where we serve her with the papers. I thought for a moment. Yeah, I can crash in my buddy Mike's place. He's got a spare room. Perfect. Go there now. And pack a bag with anything essential you might need. Try to act normal if you run into your wife. We don't want to tip our hand just yet. I thanked Ethan profusely and headed out. My mind was reeling from how quickly my life had changed. Just that morning, I'd been a happily married man, or so I thought. Now I was plotting a divorce strategy in a diner booth. I got home, and the house was quiet. I figured Olivia had gone to bed. I went up to our bedroom and quickly packed a duffel bag with clothes and toiletries. As I was about to leave, I saw the photo frame on my nightstand. It showed Olivia and me on our honeymoon in Blay, grinning widely as we posed in front of a beautiful sunset. I picked up the frame and I stared at it, looking for any sign that it had all been a lie. All I saw were two people who looked blissfully in love. I sighed and put the photo face down, quietly leaving the room. The next few days passed in a blur of meetings with lawyers, accountants, and bank managers. I threw myself into the task of untangling our finances. I was in a clear, focused state of mind. It was easier than dwelling on the emotional devastation of my marriage imploding. Finally, everything was in place. I'd managed to secure the bulk of my assets, including my inheritance and accounts that Olivia couldn't touch. Ethan had filed the divorce papers and was set to serve them to her that afternoon. I decided to be there when it happened. I wanted to see her face when she realized her plan had backfired spectacularly. I let myself into the house quietly and made my way to the kitchen. I could hear Olivia humming to herself as she chopped vegetables for dinner. It made my chest ache to see her like this. How many times had I come home to find her like this? She thought she was preparing a meal for her husband, but she was really counting down the minutes until she could be with her lover again. I cleared my throat and she turned with a look of surprise on her face. "Jack, you're home early. I wasn't expecting you for another hour at least." She must have sensed something was off because her brow furrowed in concern. "Everything okay? You look upset." I've opened my mouth to reply, but was cut off by the sound of the doorbell. "I'll get it." I headed for the front door and opened it to find Ethan's assistant standing there with a thick envelope. "Olivia Thorne?" she asked briskly. "She's inside," I replied, stepping back to let her in. Olivia appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Can I help you?" The assistant held out the envelope. "Olivia Thorne, you've been served." Olivia's face drained of color as she took the envelope with trembling hands. She looked at me in confusion. "Jack, what's going on?" I crossed my arms and leaned against the wall. "Why did you open it and find out with shaking fingers?" She tore open the envelope and scanned the contents. I saw the exact moment she realized. Her eyes widened in shock and her mouth fell open. "You're divorcing me?" "But how did you?" She trailed off, her understanding setting in. "You know that you've been your ex." Olivia was shocked to discover that her boyfriend had been planning to bleed her dry in the divorce. She was even angrier to find out that he had been going through her things. Olivia paled even further. "Jack, please let me explain. It's not what you think. I don't want to talk about this anymore." I went upstairs to get the rest of my things as I was packing up the last of my clothes. Olivia appeared in the doorway. "Where are you going to go?" she asked in a small voice. I zipped up my suitcase with more force than necessary. "That's none of your concern anymore," I told her. "Jack, please," she pleaded, grabbing my arm as I tried to leave the room. "Can't we talk about it? Let's talk about this. I know I made a mistake, but I love you. We can work through this together." I've been wavering. Part of me wanted to believe her and think there was a way to salvage our marriage, but then I remembered how casually I told her about her infidelity and how she'd laughed at my obliviousness. After everything I'd heard, I asked her to let me go. "Olivia, I can't do this. You don't love me. You never did. I was just a ticket to you." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "That's not true. I did love you. I still do. It was a mistake. Please give me another chance." But I was already halfway down the stairs, my suitcase bumping against each step. "Goodbye, Olivia. I hope you and Derek are very happy together." I walked out the front door to the sound of her sobs. I got in my car and drove away without looking back. The next few weeks were a blur. I stayed with my friend Mike, seeping on his lumpy couch and trying to piece my life back together. The divorce proceedings dragged on with Olivia fighting tooth and nail, and she tried to get as much as she could, but thanks to Ethan's skill and the evidence of her infidelity, she ended up with far less than she'd hoped as everything started to settle down. I realized I needed a fresh start. The thought of staying in the city, potentially running into Olivia or being surrounded by reminders of our life together was unbearable. I'd always had a secret fantasy of living on a ranch, spending my days working with my hands instead of staring at spreadsheets. It seemed as good a time as any to make that dream a reality. After some research, I found a cattle ranch about 3 hours outside the city. It was looking for hands, and the pay wasn't great, but room and board were included. It would be a big change from my corporate lifestyle, but that's exactly what I wanted. I called up the ranch owner, a gruff-sounding man named Bill, and arranged to come out for a trial period. 2 days later, I was driving down a dusty road in my city SUV, watching the urban sprawl give way to rolling hills and open plains as I pulled up to the main house. A man in his 60s, who looked like he'd seen better days, came out to greet me. "This must be Bill," he said, looking me up and down, taking in my pressed clothes and loafers. "You Jack?" he asked, sounding a bit rough. I nodded, suddenly feeling out of place. "That's me," I said. "Thanks for having me out here, Bill." He grunted. "Don't thank me yet, still got to see if you can hack it. Have you ever worked on a ranch before?" "No, I haven't. But I'm a hard worker and I learn quickly." He raised an eyebrow. "We'll see about that. Come on, I'll show you where you'll be staying." As Bill introduced me, he said, "This is Jack. He's going to be trying out for a spot with us." He left me to get settled in. I smiled awkwardly at my new bunkmates, aware of how I must look. One of the men, a lanky guy about my age with a thick mustache, stuck out his hand. "Welcome aboard. I'm Tom." I shook hands with him and said, "Nice to meet you, Tom. Thanks for having me." "Don't thank us yet," he said with a grin. "You'll see what Bill's got in store for you tomorrow." The other men chuckled ominously at that. I gulped, wondering what exactly I'd gotten myself into. I didn't have to wait long to find out. "Bill," I said. We were all up before dawn the next morning after a quick breakfast of eggs and coffee. Bill, who'd been in town, said, "Let's see how you do with Diablo," and led me to a massive black stallion in one of the stalls. The horse snorted and tossed its head as if sensing my fear. I looked at Bill in alarm. "You want me to ride that?" I asked. "No, I just want you to get a saddle on him," he replied. I glanced around at the other ranch hands, who were watching with poorly concealed amusement. Clearly, this was some kind of initiation ritual. Taking a deep breath, I walked over to the stall. I went over to the stall and Diablo's ears flattened against his head, and he bared his teeth menacingly. I said in what I hoped was a soothing tone, "Let's be friends, okay?" I reached out to pat his neck and he snapped at my hand. I jerked back just in time to avoid losing a finger. The other men burst out laughing. Even Bill smiled. "Maybe we should start you off with something a little tamer," he said, taking pity on me. He led me over to a gentle-looking mare named Buttercup. Over the next few hours, Bill and the others showed me the basics of caring for and riding horses. By lunchtime, I was sore in places I didn't know. I was covered in dust and sweat, and sporting what was sure to be an impressive array of bruises. But I was also exhilarated in a way I hadn't felt in years. We moved on to mending fences, which I expected to be easier than horseback riding. However, I quickly learned that wielding a post-hole digger by the time dinner came around. My hands were covered in blisters, and every muscle in my body was screaming. We sat around the long table in the bunkhouse eating a hearty meal of beef stew and cornbread. I caught Bill watching me thoughtfully. "You did all right today, Jack," Bill said, with a little grin. For someone who's used to the city, I managed a tired smile. "Thanks. I've got a lot to learn, but I'm enjoying it so far." He nodded approvingly. "That's the right attitude. We'll make a rancher out of you yet." As the days turned into weeks, I slowly began to find my footing on the ranch. The work was backbreaking and the hours were long, but I was surprised to find myself thriving in ways I never had in my previous office job. There was something deeply satisfying about collapsing to bed each night, muscles aching from honest work. I also started to bond with the other ranch hands. Tom in particular took me under his wing, patiently showing me the ropes and laughing with me. I couldn't help but laugh at my own mistakes. You should have seen your face the first time you had to help Berthico. He chuckled one evening as we sat on the porch, beers in hand, after a long day's work. I groaned at the memory. I still have nightmares about that. I had no idea that so much goop could come out of one animal. Tom gave me a pat on the shoulder and said, "You did well. You kept your cool and got the job done. That's what matters out here." His words made me realize that I'd been so focused on proving myself that I hadn't realized how much I'd come to value the respect and camaraderie of these men as spring turned to summer. I found myself getting into the swing of things on the ranch. I still had moments of usually when I was knee-deep in manual work or trying to wrestle a stubborn steer, but they were becoming fewer and farther between. One sweltering afternoon in July, Bill called me over as I was finishing up my chores. "Jack, I need you to make," he said. He needed me to go into town to get some supplies. The feed store called and said our order came in early, so they need the space. He asked if I could handle the big truck. I nodded, trying not to show how pleased I was at being trusted with his task. "No problem, boss. I'll head out now." I was able to stop doing physical work on the ranch. I drove down the dusty roads with the windows down, listening to country music on the radio. I thought about how my life had changed in just a few months. I was no longer wearing designer suits or going to power lunches. My hands were calloused, and my skin was bronzed from the sun. I had lost the soft belly I used to have. I'd had too many business dinners and replaced them with La Muscle. I felt different on the inside, too. The constant stress and pressure of my old life had melted away, replaced by a sense of purpose and contentment. I was so lost in thought that I almost missed the turn for the feed store, cursing under my breath. I swerved at the last second, only to be met with an annoyed honk from the car behind me as I backed the truck up to the loading dock. A short brunette in shorts and a play shirt tied at the waist came out to greet me. "You must be from Rockingbee," she said with a friendly smile. "I'm Sarah. My dad owns the store." I hopped out of the truck, suddenly very aware of my sweaty appearance. "Jack, Dirtstree appearance. Nice to meet you, Sarah. I'm Jack. You're new around here, aren't you?" "Sarah, I don't remember seeing you before." "Jack, I started the ranch a couple of months ago. I'm still learning the ropes." "Sarah, oh wow. What made you decide to become a ranch hand?" Asking that is what I was hesitating about. I wasn't sure how much to share. I had been looking for a change of pace and wanted to try something completely different. She must have picked up on my reluctance to elaborate, because she quickly changed the subject. We chatted easily as we finished loading the truck, and I found myself enjoying her company more than I had anyone's in a long time. Sarah hesitated for a moment before saying, "Hey, some of us locals are having a bonfire out at Miller Pond on Saturday night. You should come if you're not busy. It'd be a good chance to meet more people in town." I was surprised by the invitation. I've been so focused on my work at the ranch that I hadn't given much thought to socializing. "Great, I'll try to make it," I said. "I'll look forward to seeing you there," Sarah replied. "It starts around 8. Just follow the dirt road past the old Johnson place and you can't miss it." As I drove back to the ranch, my mind was buzzing. Was this a date? Did I even want it to be a date? The idea of getting involved with someone so soon after Olivia made me uneasy, but then again, maybe it was a good thing. I realized it was time to move on. When I got back to the ranch, I was still feeling down. I started unloading the feed, and Tom wandered over to help. He asked how the trip into town was. I said it was fine, but I hesitated before adding that I'd been invited to a bonfire on Saturday night. Tom's eyebrows shot up. "Let me guess," he said. "Sarah from the feed store?" I nodded, surprised. "How do you know?" He chuckled. "I've been keeping an eye on you," I replied. "She's been in my circle since she moved back from college. She's a nice girl, though. You should go." I rubbed the back of my neck awkwardly. It's been a while since I've done the whole dating thing. To be honest, I'm not sure I'm ready. Tom gave me a knowing look. "This has anything to do with why you left the city?" "I guess it's about why you left the city." I let out a little sigh. Sometimes I forget how perceptive Tom can be. He could say that he was quiet for a moment as we finished unloading. Then he said, "Jack, I don't know what happened to you before you came here. You don't have to tell me if you don't want to. I know you don't want to, but I do think that isolating yourself isn't the answer. Why not go to the bonfire and have some fun? You don't have to marry the girl. You just need to enjoy being around people your own age for a change. I'm going to stick to his advice for the rest of the week. By Saturday, I decided to take his advice and borrow Tom's old Chevy, since my own car was far too flashy for a casual bonfire. I drove into town and found the bonfire already in full swing. A group of about 20 people were gathered around a roaring fire, drinking beer and roasting marshmallows to the sounds of country music. We played music from someone's pickup truck, and the air was filled with laughter and chatter. I saw Sarah talking to a group of girls and made my way over. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Check, you made it," she said, giving me a quick hug. "Come on, let me introduce you to everyone." The next few hours passed in a blur of introductions, jokes, and stories. I found myself relaxing and genuinely enjoying myself for the first time in months. These people were so different from my old social circle in the city. They were down to earth, unpretentious, and genuinely friendly. As the night went on, Sarah and I found ourselves sitting a little apart from the others, our shoulders touching as we gazed into the fire. She said softly, "Are you ever going to tell me the real reason you left the city to become a ranch hand?" I looked at her, surprised, and asked, "What makes you think there's more to the story?" "You think there's more to the story?" "Jack, I grew up in a small town. I know the look of someone running from something, plus you still have the tan. Rhines, no real cowboy would be caught dead in brand new Wranglers." I laughed, caught off guard by her perceptiveness. "You're busted. There's more to the story, but it's not a happy one." Sarah's expression softened. "Sometimes talking about it helps, but only if you want to. Maybe it was the beer, the warmth of the fire, or just the fact that I was tired of carrying the weight of my secret alone. Whatever the reason, I found myself opening up to Sarah about everything: my failed marriage, Olivia's betrayal, and my impulsive decision to start over at the ranch. Sarah listened without interrupting, finding mine in the darkness when I finished. She was quiet for a long moment. "Wow, that's quite a story. I'm sorry you had to go through all that." I shrug and play it off. It is what it is. "I'm doing better now, I think. The ranch has been good for me." She squeezed my hand. "I'm glad for what it's worth." "I think you're incredibly brave. Not many people would have the courage to completely start over like that." Her words touched something deep inside me, and I felt a lump form in my throat. "Thanks." I managed to say that means a lot. We sat in comfortable silence for a while after that, watching the fire die down to embers. As people started to head home, Sarah turned to me with a shy smile. "Listen, I know you're probably not looking for anything serious right now, but I really like you. Jack, would you maybe want to go out sometime just as friends if that's all you're comfortable with?" I hesitated, torn between the attraction I felt for Sarah and the fear of getting hurt again. But then I remembered Tom's advice about not isolating myself. "I'd like that," I said finally, "but you're right, I'm not ready for anything serious yet. Is that okay?" Sarah nodded. "More than okay. We'll take it slow." I drove back to the ranch that night with a spring in my step. I felt like I could take on the world. Opening up to Sarah had helped me let go of some of the pent-up emotions I'd been carrying around. And the prospect of exploring a new relationship, even if it was just friendship for now, gave me something to look forward to over the next few weeks. Sarah and I started spending more time together. We'd meet for coffee or town on my days off, or she'd come out to the ranch to watch me work and laugh at my still occasional mishaps. True to her word, we kept things casual and friendly. But I could feel myself starting to open up more to trust again. One evening in late August, Sarah and I were walking along the fence line of the ranch, watching the sun set over the hills. We'd been talking and laughing about nothing in particular when Sarah suddenly grew serious. "Jack," she said, stopping and turning to face me, "I need to tell you something." My heart skipped a beat. Had she grown tired of waiting for me to be ready for more? Was she going to end things? I asked, trying to keep the nervousness out of my voice. Sarah took a deep breath. "I got a job offer in Chicago. It's a great opportunity. It's something I've been working towards for a long time, but I'm not sure I want to take it." I blinked, surprised. This wasn't at all what I'd been expecting. I was expecting her to say something like that. She looked up at me, her eyes shining in the fading light. "If it's such a great opportunity, I think I'm falling in love with you, and I don't want to leave if there's a chance you might feel the same way." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I was flooded with a whirlwind of emotions: fear, excitement, doubt, and hope. "Sarah, I trailed off, unsure of what to say. She held up a hand, saying, "You don't have to answer right now. I know this is a lot to take in. Just think about it. The job doesn't start for another month. I have some. It was time to make a decision." I nodded silently, my mind reeling. Sarah gave me a small smile and a quick kiss on the cheek before heading back to her car. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Sarah's confession had forced me to confront feelings I'd been trying to ignore. The truth was that I cared for her deeply. She'd become an important part of my life here, bringing laughter and light back into my world when I thought it was gone forever. But was I ready to open my heart again? The pain of Olivia's betrayal was still fresh, and I was still afraid of being hurt. But the thought of Sarah leaving or losing her was even more painful. When dawn broke, I made my decision. I got dressed quickly and drove into town, stopping to pick up coffee and Sarah's favorite cinnamon rolls from the local bakery. When I knocked on her door, Sarah answered, looking, "Jack, what are you doing here so rarely?" I held out the coffee and pastries, hoping we could talk. She ushered me in, and we sat at her small kitchen table. I took a deep breath, gathering my courage. "Sarah, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I've been thinking about us and the future, and I realized something. I'm not just worried about you leaving, I'm also worried because I think I'm falling in love with you too." Sarah's eyes widened. "Jack," I held up a hand, needing to get it all out. "I know I've been hesitant. I'm scared of getting hurt again, but you've shown me that not everyone is like Olivia. You've been patient, kind, and understanding. You've helped me remember what it feels like to trust someone and let them in." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I can't promise it'll be easy, but I'm willing to give it a try. It'll be fine. I've still got a lot of issues to work through, but if you're willing to be patient with me a little longer, I'd like to give us a real shot." Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, but she was smiling. "Oh, Jack, of course I'm willing. I'd wait forever for you if I had to." I went over to her and stood up to give her a hug and kiss. I felt like I could finally let my walls down. I knew there'd still be challenges, but for the first time in a long time, I was excited about the future. 5 years later, I wiped the sweat from my brow as I finished mending the fence in the south pasture. The summer sun beat down mercilessly, but I hardly noticed. My mind was on the dinner waiting for me back at the house. So much had changed in the past 5 years. Sar had turned down the job in Chicago, choosing instead. We dated for a year before we got engaged, and now we've been happily married for 3. Bill retired last year and sold the ranch to me and Tom. It was a big change going from ranch hand to owner, but I loved it. The work was still hard, but I felt really good about it. I knew that every fence I fixed and every cough I helped with was contributing to something that was mine. As I walked back to the house, I smiled at the sight of Sarah on the porch with our 6-year-old. It's been about a month. My daughter Emma gave me a wave when she saw me coming up the steps. "There's my handsome cowboy," she called out teasingly. "Dinner's almost ready. Why didn't you go get cleaned up?" I went up the steps and gave her a quick kiss, then a soft kiss on Emma's downy head. "Yes, ma'am," I said with a wink as I headed inside to shower. I looked in the mirror and saw a face that was tanned and weathered from years of outdoor work. I could see the laugh lines crinkling the corners of my eyes. I hardly recognized the slick city businessman I'd once been. Sometimes I thought about my old life and Olivia. I'd heard through the grapevine that things hadn't worked out with Derek. Last I knew, she was on her 3rd marriage and struggling financially. I felt a twinge of sadness for her, but no regret. Losing Olivia had led me here to this life that I loved more. I was amazed at how much I'd changed. I'd gone from being Sarah's boss to Emma's dad to running the ranch. As I stepped into the shower, letting the cool water wash away the dust and sweat of the day, I sent up a silent prayer of thanks. I'd lost everything once, but I'd gained so much more in return. Life had a funny way of working out sometimes. Later that night, as I sat on the porch with Sarah, watching the stars come out over the ranch, I felt a deep sense of peace settle over me. This was where I belonged. This was my home.